Hi, bitch.
No, I was trying to meet you.
Doc.
I'm sorry.
Sorry for shit. No strip. Bitch.
The film opens inside a suburban middle school in New Jersey, where 12-year-old Dawn Wiener quietly searches for a place to sit during lunch. The cafeteria is crowded and noisy, students laughing and whispering as she moves between tables carrying her tray. She finally sits beside a gloomy girl who tells her with a smirk that someone has vomited nearby. Moments later, a group of cheerleaders approaches and mockingly asks Dawn if she is a lesbian. The girls laugh and walk away, leaving Dawn humiliated and alone. After lunch, Dawn opens her locker and finds it covered in crude graffiti and insults. A few feet away, 3 bullies torment a boy with glasses. Dawn tries to defend him, calling the girls jerks, but instead of gratitude, the boy joins the mockery and calls her a dog. The nickname spreads quickly. Down the hall, students laugh and whisper, "Wiener dog," as she walks past. At home that afternoon, Dawn's younger sister Missy, a cheerful 7-year-old in a pink tutu, dances in the living room while their mother praises her. Their older brother Mark, a quiet high school junior, practices clarinet with his friends in the garage, trying to form a rock band. Dawn sits nearby watching, but no one pays attention to her. Missy taunts her sister, calling her a lesbian again. Dawn complains, but her mother sides with Missy, scolding Dawn and sending her to her room, while Missy happily keeps the television to herself. The next day at school, Dawn sits in class during a test. The school bully, Brandon McCarthy, blatantly copies from her paper. Dawn raises her hand and reports him to the teacher. Instead of thanking her, the teacher punishes them both, assigning detention. Later, Dawn and Brandon are forced to stay after school to rewrite the test. He makes crude remarks, smirking as he stares at her. When the teacher returns her papers, she gives Dawn a low grade and dismissively tells her she has no dignity. Dawn begs for another chance, but the teacher refuses and orders her to write an essay about dignity. In the restroom afterward, Dawn is cornered by a girl named Lolita, who accuses her of trying to impress Brandon and blocks the door. Lolita forces her to sit on the toilet and says she will not let her leave until she does. She tells Dawn she is ugly and warns her to stay away from Brandon. Shaken, Dawn escapes and hides in the stall until the bell rings. At home, she retreats to a small, run-down clubhouse in the backyard, a place she built herself with old wood and scraps. There she meets her only friend, a 5th grader named Ralphie, a shy boy who helps her decorate the little shack. They call it their Special People's Club. Dawn dreams of being popular, but her world remains small and lonely. That evening at dinner, Mark excitedly announces a plan to make his band famous. He wants to invite the most popular boy in school, Steve Rogers, to join as lead singer. Their parents smile approvingly, but Dawn stays silent. When Missy complains that Dawn is annoying, their mother demands that Dawn apologize. Dawn refuses, and her mother orders her to stay at the table until she says she loves her sister. Hours pass. The lights dim. Dawn remains seated long after everyone has gone to bed. Late that night, Dawn sneaks into Missy's room and saws off the head of her mermaid Barbie doll as revenge. She wanders into the garage where her brother's band rehearses. To her surprise, Mark has really brought Steve Rogers, a handsome senior with long hair and a confident smile. He strums his guitar and sings as the others play along. Dawn hides in the corner watching him, completely mesmerized. That night she lies awake, thinking about him. The next day, during a school assembly, a high school senior named Mary speaks about being kidnapped a year earlier and warns the students to be careful with strangers. While she talks, Dawn is teased by kids in the back row. Frustrated, Dawn loads a straw with a paper pellet and fires it, accidentally hitting the teacher in the eye. Chaos follows. The teacher yells, and Dawn is sent to the principal's office. Her parents are called in. The principal lectures her sternly, while her mother complains that Dawn has no friends. Outside the office window, other kids make faces and mock her. Dawn sits silently as her parents argue with the principal. Later that week, Steve visits Mark to practice. When Mark leaves the room, Dawn quietly enters in her pajamas and stares at Steve. They talk briefly about how much they both hate school. For a moment, she feels noticed. When Mark returns, he angrily throws her out. Alone in her room, Dawn imagines romantic scenes with Steve and whispers to herself that someday he will love her. Soon after, Mark receives a breakup letter from a girl he met at summer camp. He tells Dawn that she wanted to sleep with him, but he refused because college is more important than romance. Meanwhile, Steve flirts with every girl he meets. Dawn hears gossip that he and a popular girl named Ginger had fun together the previous summer. Determined to learn more, Dawn approaches Ginger, who laughs and tells her she has no chance with Steve, mocking her appearance. Dawn looks at herself in the mirror afterward, studying her face and hands, and begins to cry. One afternoon, Steve stops by when Dawn is home alone. She invites him in and offers food. He pockets some cash from the table without hesitation, then sits and eats while Dawn watches him in awe. Trying to impress him, she plays a tune on the piano and shows him her hands, saying she uses them to make music. As he leaves, he drops his ID card. Dawn picks it up and whispers a childish spell, wishing that he would fall in love with her. At the next band rehearsal, Dawn watches from the corner, singing along as Steve performs. The boys criticize his playing, and Steve storms out, quitting the band. Mark is angry, but Dawn is heartbroken. That evening, she and Ralphie walk home together, but they're stopped by Brandon and his gang. Brandon threatens Ralphie and insults Dawn. Furious, Dawn calls him stupid and walks away. Brandon glares at her and says he will get his revenge, warning that he will rape her at 3 o'clock. From that moment, Brandon follows Dawn around school, repeating his threat. Lolita tries to flirt with him, but he ignores her completely. When the final bell rings, Dawn runs for the back exit, but Brandon is waiting. He grabs her, presses her against the wall, and pulls out a knife. Terrified, Dawn freezes. Before anything happens, the janitor appears, and she manages to escape. That night, she lies awake, trembling. The next day at home, her mother announces that the family will celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary with a backyard party. To make space, they will tear down Dawn's little clubhouse. Dawn protests, but her mother insists it must go. Later, Brandon calls her on the phone, threatening to meet again the next day, same time, same place. Despite her fear, Dawn sneaks out and goes to meet him. Brandon leads her to an abandoned shed, still holding a knife. She lies down on the ground, too scared to move. He offers her a cigarette, but she refuses. Slowly, his tone softens. He tells her about his mentally challenged brother Tommy, admitting that sometimes he loses control because of his home life. Dawn listens quietly, and then Brandon suddenly kisses her. The two sit silently for a moment before he stands, saying it's too late and he has no time to do what he came for. He warns her not to tell anyone. At home, Dawn's mother scolds her again for being lazy and messy. She punishes her by giving a leftover chocolate cake to Mark and Missy while Dawn gets nothing. Missy smiles as their mother tells the good kids they can help clean the backyard by tearing down the clubhouse that weekend. Meanwhile, Mark manages to convince Steve to perform at the anniversary party in exchange for $200. Dawn secretly listens, thrilled that she will see Steve again. The day of the anniversary party arrived, and the backyard filled with folding tables, decorations, and neighbors chatting as music played. In the center of a table stood a large cake with colorful icing shaped like 2 cartoon faces. Missy, wearing her pink tutu, danced from guest to guest, soaking up attention. Their parents laughed proudly, greeting everyone. Mark and Steve performed on a small stage, the band's loud music echoing through the yard. But Dawn was nowhere to be seen. Inside the house, Dawn stood by the window watching the party, tears in her eyes. Everyone outside seemed happy without her. Eventually, she wiped her face and went outside, walking quietly around the crowd. She found Steve near the utility room, where he had slipped away with another girl. When Dawn approached to talk, he looked embarrassed and told her that her special people's club must be for idiots, then shut the door in her face. Dawn turned away, crushed, and went back inside unnoticed. After the party, Steve dropped out of school and left town to chase his dream of becoming a musician in New York. Days later, the family gathered in the living room to rewatch the party recording. They laughed loudly at the part where Missy pushed Dawn into a kiddie pool, rewinding it several times. Dawn sat silently, her face blank, then quietly left the room. That night, she woke up, grabbed a hammer, and smashed the videotape into pieces. For a moment, she stood over Missy's bed holding the hammer, but she couldn't bring herself to strike. She lowered her hand and returned to her room in silence. At school, Brandon no longer looked at her. During a test, Dawn slipped him a folded note, but he ignored it. Suddenly, the principal entered with 2 police officers and ordered Brandon to come with them. The class watched as he was led away in handcuffs, accused of drug dealing. Dawn stared at his empty desk, uncertain if the rumors were true. That afternoon, her mother had to leave to pick up her father, whose car had broken down. She handed Dawn a note for Missy, explaining that she needed to ride home from ballet class with her teacher. Dawn sat watching television with the note beside her. When the phone rang, it was Ralphie. He asked to speak with Missy and invited Dawn to come over, saying he was her best friend. Dawn, irritated, said cruel things about him, calling him stupid, not realizing he could hear everything. After the call ended, Missy finished dressing for ballet. As she left the house, Dawn looked at the note again, then turned away and chose not to give it to her. Evening came, and Missy did not return home. Hours passed before their parents called the police. Her father grew sick from worry, and her mother frantically called neighbors. Dawn sat in silence, realizing what she had done but saying nothing. The next morning, the police had no leads. At breakfast, her mother cried while her father stared blankly at the table. Dawn tried to comfort him, saying that even if Missy wasn't found, he still had her and Mark. Later, Dawn decided to visit Brandon's house. His home was small and cluttered, the paint peeling from the walls. His father, a rough-looking man with an unshaven face, opened the door. Brandon's mentally challenged brother Tommy wandered around the living room. Brandon's father gruffly allowed Dawn to say goodbye, explaining that his son was being sent away to a correctional facility. In Brandon's room, she found him packing a duffel bag. Dawn said she wanted to be his girlfriend, but he told her it was too late. He was running away to New York instead. Before leaving, he kissed her once and asked if she wanted to lose her virginity right then, but she turned away. He shrugged, slung the bag over his shoulder, and climbed out the window into the night. That evening during dinner, the phone rang. The police had found Missy's ballet tutu in Times Square. The family froze. Their mother cried harder, and Dawn listened quietly, her face pale. Hours later, while everyone slept, Dawn packed a small bag and decided to go to New York herself. She took a bus and arrived in the city before dawn. Carrying printed photos of Missy, she taped them on streetlights and brick walls, asking strangers if they had seen her sister. She wandered through alleys and crowded sidewalks until nightfall, exhausted and alone. In one dark alley, she thought she saw a man dragging Missy away. Dawn ran forward and screamed for help. She fought the man and pulled Missy free, and their mother appeared, rushing to hug them both. People around clapped, and reporters shouted questions as lights flashed. Dawn stood smiling, surrounded by praise, finally loved and admired. But then the sound faded, and she opened her eyes in a small motel room. It had been a dream. She was still alone. Dawn found a payphone and called home. Mark answered, surprised to hear her voice. He told her that the police had already found Missy that morning. Their neighbor, Mr. Kasdan, had kidnapped her and kept her hidden in his basement. He hadn't harmed her. He'd simply let her watch television and eat candy. Mark added that their mother wasn't too upset about Dawn being gone as well. The line went silent. A few days later, Dawn stood in the school auditorium giving a speech to thank her classmates for their support in finding the kidnapper. As she spoke, a voice from the crowd shouted "dog," and laughter erupted across the room. The students chanted the insult again and again until the principal yelled for silence. Dawn stood frozen for a moment, then finished her speech in a trembling voice and walked off the stage. Life returned to normal. The family gathered in the kitchen as if nothing had happened. Missy practiced ballet in the living room while their parents discussed chores. Dawn asked her brother if life would always be this bad. Mark told her that middle school was the worst, but high school would be better, maybe even normal. Dawn nodded slowly, trying to believe him. Weeks later, the school year ended. Students boarded a bus for a summer field trip to Florida. Dawn sat among them, gazing out the window as they sang the school anthem. Her face was expressionless. The bus rolled down the highway, the singing continuing around her, but Dawn quietly stopped moving her lips. She stared through the glass at the passing world, lost in thought as the music faded. The story ends with the lonely image of Dawn on the bus, silently watching the road ahead, uncertain of what her future will bring.